The atheist Richard Dawkins once famously trolled the God of the Old Testament by calling him arguably the most unpleasant character in all fiction. And after some time with the thesaurus, he went on to say that he's a petty, unjust, unforgiving control freak, a vindictive, bloodthirsty ethnic cleanser, a misogynistic, homophobic, racist, infanticidal, genocidal, filicidal, pestilential, megalomaniacal, sadomasochistic, capriciously malevolent bully. Wow. Now, that is a serious charge. And sometimes the way that this question is framed is by juxtaposing the New Testament gentle and loving character of Jesus with what is assumed to be a vindictive and capricious character of Yahweh in the Old Testament. Now, the first way that I would want to respond to this is by asking somebody like Richard Dawkins or an atheist what moral framework they have in order to make this judgment about the God of the Old Testament. After all, Richard Dawkins tells us that we live in a world in which there's ultimately no good and no evil and no justice. So what moral framework is he using in order to call the activity of the God of the Old Testament unjust? Now, there are many specific texts that we would need to look at in order to really do this question justice. But I'm just going to take an overview in this particular episode of Short Answers. And when we look at the God of the Old Testament, yes, we see that he is represented as a God who is holy and who takes sin and wickedness seriously and who hates injustice. So in that sense, God is good, but he's never safe. He's a God who cares about how people are treated, about how the environment is treated. He's a God who never trivializes wickedness and injustice. And yet, even when that God of the Old Testament does bring justice and judgment, it's never arbitrary. It's always given in a forewarned way so that people have an opportunity to repent and change, and if so, God will relent from bringing the justice that he had promised. And it's never partial. God brings the same level of justice on the same terms to his own people, Israel, in the Old Testament, as he does to other nations. And so it's fair. But it is fair to say that when we look at the sweep of the character of the God of the Old Testament, that he is in fact far from what we might consider to be a moral monster. We live in a world where people are crying out for justice and looking for people to take injustice seriously. And so if the God of the Bible wasn't a God who took those things seriously, we might consider the fact that he is immoral because he's actually complicit in a whole system that is trivializing and not taking seriously the things that we know are wrong and that we care about. The God of the Old Testament is not a moral monster. In fact, he's quite the opposite. What we see is a God who creates human beings with a specific quality of being made in his image. That is, that they have value and dignity regardless of their gender, their ethnicity, their ability, or their productivity. He's a God who's not distant, but is constantly engaging with people all throughout the Bible, wanting them to know who he is, wanting them to understand how his mind and his ways work so that they can come to trust him on the basis of the evidence and not blindly. He's a God who's slow to anger and abounding in loyal, steadfast love. Ultimately, the Old Testament God is a God who wants to presence himself with people and wants them to trust him in full relationship. He's a God who's radically committed to promising the hope of a changed world and changed hearts. And ultimately, that comes to full revelation and fulfillment in the person of Jesus, which is why this juxtaposition between Jesus and the Yahweh God of the Old Testament is in fact a false dichotomy by Jesus' own admission. Jesus claimed to be fulfilling the agenda of the God of the Old Testament. He claimed to be the I am God of the Old Testament. And at one point when his disciple asked him to show them the Father, namely the God of the Old Testament, Jesus turned to Philip and said, "Don't you know me? Whoever has seen the Father has seen me." So Jesus sees no disparity whatsoever between the Yahweh God of the Old Testament and himself. There's a lot more that we could say and explore, but when we look carefully and honestly and for ourselves at the overall picture of the God of the Old Testament, I think we can see that he is not a moral monster at all. If you want to really get to know a person, look at them and get to know them and study them for yourself and come to your own evaluation. And if you want to get to know the God of the Bible, the God of the Old Testament, look for yourself rather than necessarily listening to sound bites, and evaluate, what is this God like? What does he offer people? What is he committed to? What does he take seriously? And then make your judgment about him. If you'd like to know more, Paul Copan has written an excellent book called Is God a Moral Monster?, which answers a lot of these questions.